Welcome in, everyone. CT with Mark Berman, the one and only former Knicks beat writer on the eve of Media Day. Right, it's great to get Mark's thoughts on the big blockbuster. Karl Anthony Towns now is a New York Knick, and we'll talk about the origins of the links. But Mark Berman was one of the original people to talk about the links of Karl Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks as well. Mark, it's great to see you. How you doing?
Oh, doing great. Thanks, CT, for inviting me on. What a trade. I mean, it's epic. I'm shocked. I didn't think Leon had another blockbuster in him after Mikal Bridges, but he apparently realized that roster with Mitchell's situation wasn't perfect. Hardly.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of layers to it, and ultimately the timing, Mark. I mean, we mentioned the particulars, Randle going, Dante DiVincenzo. We'll get your thoughts on him being included. But what do you feel like pushed this trade to happen now on the eve of Media Day? Is it the obvious that players, are set to fly into their cities and just it came to a head?
Yeah, they've been talking all summer, but the Knicks were trying to do something different from the center position. So when they make the Mikal Bridges trade and give up so many futures, I think Leon thought he was done. And then they lose iHeart to free agency and are unable to fill his void. Uh, and then Mitchell must have had some major setback that has not been reported, and hence they realized he's not coming back to January. So I think they were afraid of being maybe a fifth, sixth seed with the roster the way it was. And Leon probably he knows he's got to get out of the second round this year. Three straight second round defeats won't cut it. I think even the most diehard Knicks fan would realize that that's a failure. So he swings for the fences. He gets a player that he's been a agent for, and the Knicks have long lusted for Carl even before Leon took over. My first story on Cat to the Knicks came when Steve and Scott Perry were in charge. I did that first story about the Knicks are waiting for that first disgruntled superstar, and Carl was at the head of the list, figuring a New Jersey guy who grew up a Knicks fan would one day want out of Minnesota. So the timing, they just did not want to give up Dante. I mean, he shined not only most of the season, but once his jitters in the first few games against the Sixers in the first round went away, he just lit it up in the playoffs. From the 3-point land, defensively, late in the Sixer series, throughout the entire Pacer series, he was fantastic. And they just did not want to give up that 3-point machine, and they could miss him. Josh Hart's not a 3-point shooter, and OG better stay healthy.
Yeah, we'll get your thoughts on some legacy of Dante and Julius, but obviously Dante was, I think you could argue, one of the most shocking elements of this trade, and why Knicks fans were shocked as they were. Because if you talked about just a Julius for a Cat swap and maybe some other salary pieces, but obviously Dante's salary was needed, and it was the holdup, as you said. But
Well,
now Carl Anthony.
it wasn't
Mm,
just the salary. I mean, Minnesota really, really wanted Dante. Their offense, despite making the Western Conference Finals, they really were a defensive-oriented team, and they think Dante could really add another layer to their attack. Hitting those 3-point shots, and he could take the ball to the basket. And he's a very smart, high IQ offensive player. So they wanted Dante and Julius. They feel it's not the worst drop off. A scout said that Minnesota's still a Final Four Western Conference team. There's still a Big Four in the Western Conference after this trade. The drop off with Julius is a little bit for sure, but getting Dante is a huge plus for the Wolves. And, for the Knicks, again, the scout said Julius needed the ball. He needed the ball, and Jalen wants the ball now. So we were all anticipating how it was going to work. Forget about January. I know they had that big stretch in January, but that's the regular season. Only Thibodeau is going full bore in the regular season. What would Julius and Jalen been like in the playoffs? And Dante, and would there have been enough ball? Cat does not need the ball. He could be a catch and shoot 3-pointer on offense sometimes. He just does not need the ball to be very effective.
Yeah, so do you feel like this has the makings of a win-win? Because I do feel like Julius will really help Minnesota as well as Dante. But best case scenario, long term, could you see Karl Anthony Towns with Bridges, OG Anunoby with health? Can the Knicks get to at least the Eastern Conference Finals and push Boston?
No doubt their ceiling is higher. The scouts said they're a legitimate Eastern Conference title championship contender. I don't think you could have said that before this trade. I had my doubts about whether they could get out of that second round, especially with that injured roster. Listen, Jules is no lock to be healthy either. I mean, 2 straight years of injuries for him. He's getting older. I think he hit 30. He was very durable at one point of his career, except actually his rookie year when he missed almost all of it. But since then, he was very durable. And now he's at the point of the career, at his career where, it's a little bit of a risk. Mitchell is a huge risk. Uh, OG has been injury prone his whole year. Cat has had surgeries. I mean, he hasn't been a perfect bill of health there, but I think he's been pretty healthy. Uh, so I think the ceiling is now getting to the finals, and Cat has room to grow. I think Julius has hit his peak. I think Cat could get better, especially in the playoffs. I remember 2 years ago seeing Cat kind of disappear in a big playoff game, elimination game. And I was very concerned after seeing like he could in the fourth quarter, like it's almost like he didn't want the ball. I think that's changed now after this run to the Western Conference Finals. But I will make the point, and I tweeted it. Why is Minnesota, after making the Western Conference Finals, so interested in trading Towns? I know he's got that monster salary, but if he's going to help you win a championship, you keep him. I'm not sure Minnesota thinks he's a championship player. That's my gut talking, and the Knicks will find out.
That's a fair point, but they do have their number one, as do the Knicks, so it's easier to slide a secondary option, I think, and hope that that's enough. Because obviously Ant-Man, there's talk that he has the keys and they believe in him, and obviously the Knicks believe in Jalen. But it's worth noting, Mark, as Media Day hits on Monday, the trade's not confirmed. So Leon or whoever speaks, Tibbs, no one can mention it. But I'll throw a question to you, as I did with EJ in the last episode. If you were there on Media Day and you had the opportunity to rep Nick's Buzz and ask one question to Tibbs and one question to Leon, what would be the most curious question that you would love to ask?
Well, unfortunately, you're right. So now the reporters have a very awkward situation tomorrow where they can't. Thibodeau will not be able to address the trade. I don't know if he's going to try to talk around it. Usually the Knicks are very strict. So it's going to be very difficult to get Tibbs to talk about it. Cat won't be able to talk. So I joked with one of the writers today, you should just say to Thibodeau, oh, by the way, where's Dante? But I mean, the big question to Leon, I think, is are you done? Is this your championship caliber team? Or do you think you have to make another significant move? After the trade, still a lot of rumblings about Mitchell Robinson being dealt. I'm not sure what position. Do they want a center who could shoot? I still love Mitchell. I mean, I'm still wearing my relaxed T-shirt, and I love what Mitchell. He's one of those unique players. You don't see it in the NBA. Traditional center, shot blocker, rebounder, best offensive rebounder perhaps in the NBA. And listen, I know I've covered so many of his injuries, and since I retired, he's been injured even more. And last season, unfortunately, the low point. But I feel he adds an element that you really can't find elsewhere. I guess the Knicks are truly concerned about his feet. With big men, stress fractures. I mean, in general, big men and their feet, once they start getting injured, it's always a concern. But if they trade Mitchell, it's clear that they're not confident in his health. But that would be the question for Leon. Naturally, Leon won't take a question until he gets fired, and maybe he'll write a memoir, and we'll be able to read about all his thoughts during his reign. But there is no way Leon. I shouldn't say no way, but I would highly doubt that Leon Rose will talk even at the Cat press conference or until he gets fired by the Knicks.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point. That leads us into sort of the depth concerns now, Mark. And I'll just bring up a graphic with the Knicks center options now. You mentioned the Mitch rumor now, a trade report that here the Knicks are taking calls on Mitchell Robinson. Cat, a question I would want to know is Cat your preferred center? Is 50% at the five? Is he going to be 50% at the four? If Mitch is healthy, what would Tibbs love to do? Precious is obviously the backup who's healthy right now. OG did a pretty good job on Embiid, certain matchups, but then you've got Jericho and the rookie Huck Porty. So, Mark, how do you feel about the Knicks' depth? Now, they did gut some of their depth, and that is a concern of some fans.
I think their best lineup when Mitchell is healthy is to bring Mitchell off the bench with that energy and rebounding. I think there's such a versatility with Bridges being able to play the four, and Josh Hart was doing fantastic getting rebounds at the four. Uh, so, I mean, I just feel that Mitchell, they have no backup center. I don't like Precious. I mean, he can't shoot. I know Mitchell can't either, but he could get buckets just from his offensive rebounds and alley oops. So, I mean, Precious is a very limited player. So, if you're a championship team and Precious is your backup, I'm a little queasy about that. So, I think to take advantage of the versatility of OG playing the four and Bridges playing the four, uh, you know, Josh Hart. I would like to see Mitchell come off the bench when he's healthy. But Cat is a center. I mean, he was drafted as a center. I know he can play power forward, but you can mix and match and do different things.
Yeah, it's just the numbers don't suggest that he's the rim protector that Tibbs really loves, and obviously you can't replace Mitch's defensive prowess, and Hartenstein, as you said, was a big loss, and maybe that was a turning point, a pivot in terms of the Knicks playing a different way. We mentioned off air Tibbs did that interview with NBA.com. Was that to sort of preview what he would do with Randle, or to maybe show Minnesota what they had in Randle?
Yeah. When you look back at the NBA.com exclusive interview with Thibodeau, when the question about Mitchell Robinson's status was not asked, uh, it was clear that Thibodeau was sending a message about Randle can play the five, Minnesota. I think he was showcasing uh, the Timberwolves, saying, "We believe in Julius at the five, and you should too." So I think Julius will play some five in Minnesota. Listen, Julius in Minnesota, he's a very good player and had a great Knicks career. But in Minnesota, he's not going to get the same buzz like nationwide. Like he may, with Edwards as the front man, you may in New York. We may not once the season starts. We may not hear a lot about Julius Randle. He may be a third option, secondary player. But I do think that interview was aimed at sending a message to the Timberwolves staff.
So just on the Julius legacy topic now, and obviously Dante included, but I mean fans are so divided on this trade still, Mark. I've never,
It's amazing.
in all my fandom, in the Knicks acquiring an All-Star, and back when they were acquired Stephon Marbury and other players, Carmelo. I mean, we're getting a Cat an All-Star multiple times with his game. And still fans are so divided. And so Julius's legacy, that says a lot about where it is. EJ compared it to sort of an Amari Stoudemire kind of legacy where he started a big advancement, a movement, and now the Knicks are in a very strong position. So how would you look back on a Julius Randle legacy with the New York Knicks all the way back since he came in the summer of 19?
Yeah, well, I'll disagree with EJ a little bit. I think the fans are more missing Dante. I mean, I think they love Dante, and I think this team was so likable in the playoffs that even after losing in the second round, they could live with it because they enjoyed watching Dante and this group play together. Julius obviously did not play the last part of the regular season or the playoffs. Uh, I also think that there's a reputation of Towns as being soft, uh, and he got to the conference finals last year, so I think that should be a notch on his resume. But the soft label is still there. He's definitely not, as you mentioned, the rim protector, or he doesn't have that I heart grit. And I think the Knicks are concerned at the center position they're not going to be as gritty, or the team won't be as gritty without uh, Julius, without Dante. So I am surprised at the mixed nature. I thought it was a. I thought Leon Rose said, "We're trying to break the curse here. We're not just trying to get out of the second round and give the Celtics a really good match in the conference finals. This franchise has not won since 1973. I'm getting paid a ton of money. My payroll is pretty good, not second apron high, but now it is. But let's go for the championship, okay? And there's no stud team out there. The Celtics had a lot of question marks too before they were able to win the title. There's no juggernaut. The Western Conference is wide open. So Leon is taking this mighty cut, and I think he should be commended. I don't commend him a lot, but the Mikal Bridges trade, although I really liked it, once they lost iHeart and didn't replace him, I was concerned that this was a second round team. Very surprised by Knicks fans. They have to realize they have a way higher ceiling now than they did 5 or 3 days ago.
So yeah, I mean, Julius did have a lot of success in the city as well. And what was he like to cover? And as well as retiring former Nick Derrick Rose as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Julius, I had my ups and downs with covering Julius. He could be moody. I mean, but I think that was a good thing in a way because he played angry, which was sometimes very good. He was a brutish type player. His bully ball really was effective, and so that anger actually translated in a good way on the court. But covering him was interesting. I know there was at UCLA that one time right before the trade deadline was asking him about the fact that he's on the trade block, and he really questioned me hard about where you're hearing this from, who's your source, where you're hearing this from. And the irony, it was like my son has only been at like Knicks practices like 3 times in his life, and he lives in San Diego, so he happened to be at that practice. I was standing kind of like right behind me while Julius is grilling me. But listen, he was always interesting. He was always interesting to cover. Uh, I think Cat has some good one-liners and stuff, but Julius was really fun to cover. Derrick Rose, getting back to his retirement, and what a great locker room guy for us, for the media. He was always there. So before the games, we're allowed to talk to the players, except most of the players go to the training room. Derrick Rose was always by his locker, ready to talk about anything. And I always had the image that he was sort of, just reading from the Chicago media, like maybe standoffish, aloof, shy. But when he first joined the Knicks for the first time, I remember he was coming off that. He had flown back from his sexual misconduct trial, and we were all a little leery about asking him about it. I thought he'd just say no comment, no comment. He answered every single question very openly. I was shocked. So from there, I knew, that Derek was going to be very good for the media. Great, great career. Obviously, would have been a greater career if the knees did not break down so early. It happened, or usually it happens late, but with Derek, the knees started to go early, and he still continued to play at a very high level despite knees that were compromised.
Yeah, he's such a unique player in his prime. Before the first knee injury, I sort of compare him to sort of a athleticism of an Anthony Edwards, but in a point guard's body. And trying to explain to some people that didn't get to witness it. But yeah, absolutely. It came across that way that he was, good to cover as well. And I think you've said Carmelo Anthony was your favorite Nick to cover in terms of always being, friendly with the media and just giving good quotes.
Yeah, but the one thing about Carmelo, you couldn't get him before the game. He was back in his training room, pretty much avoiding us. Post game, he was fantastic. After practice, fantastic. You could ask Carmelo any question. He would never. He would always try to give his best answer. He would never, he would never dismiss you. Even some of the wilder ones, some really wild questions during the Phil Jackson controversy, he answered it all.
Yeah, and obviously Mitch. Mitch has to be one of your favorite players to cover, right? You're still wearing that T-shirt. He's the longest tenured Nick Mark, and still, although for we don't know for how long, but he did put something out very cryptic last night, and yeah, it just seems like he relishes being a New York Nick, but it's just a lot of spotlight.
Yeah, I think he's wondering, am I the Knicks starting center anymore? Uh, yeah, it was a little. That's Mitch. I mean, he's Mr. Cryptic. Entire career, he's had these weird tweets, but he still comes back. He's never really asked for a trade. I think he's grown to love New York City after being a sort of a country kid from the outskirts of New Orleans. Uh, but yeah, he was so much fun to cover. He always, you walk in the locker room, he'd be making cracks and then just some of the things coming out of his mouth. He was always so confident and pretty much willing to say anything, to explain how good he feels he is. And that's the thing. It's like he really thinks he's a dominating center. And on the defensive end, he is. And as an offensive rebounder, he is. It's still been perplexing to me that he was never able to grow an offensive game. I spoke to his high school coach multiple times, especially early in his career. He was telling me Mitchell was shooting 3-point shots during games and making them. And then his free throw shooting very early in his career was very good. And I think he's got a little bit of a mental block now for the free throw line, which hurts because, teams down the stretch of games, especially playoff games, would send him to the line. Although he did come up with some clutch free throws, it's a little scary.
Yeah, so we're all fascinated to see how Media Day and training camp plays out and a big season ahead. It's always great to talk to you, Mark, on the New York Knicks and hear your thoughts. 23 years of covering the New York Knicks, and look, the championship window seems to be opening. According to you, the ceiling is higher now. Let's see how it all plays out versus Boston.
Yeah, CT, I think the Knicks, I mean, they were always an intriguing team coming into this season. So much hype. ESPN loves to brag about how good the Knicks are, but I think it's real now. I think there is no doubt the Boston Celtics should be a little worried. They should be a little worried. If Cat could make a little next step, progress a little more, I think the Celtics could be in a little bit of trouble.
Hear from you, Mark, and everyone. Smash that like button, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Our coverage will continue of the training camp and preseason. Right, Julius Randle in Minnesota will officially visit the Garden regular season in this year, December 19 as well. I would expect, Mark, that there's a big ovation for these Knicks.
Oh, I mean, the Knicks from last season were one of the most beloved teams since the late '90s. Maybe the most beloved team since the late '90s. So yeah, it's going to be crazy on opening night. So I won't be there. I'll be watching on national TV though from Florida. But I can't wait for the season. It's going to be so exciting, and your shows are going to take off. I mean, I feel there's more interest in the Knicks than ever at this point after this trade in particular. So, thanks for inviting me, CT. You guys do a great job here, and appreciate the time again.
Yeah, likewise, and yeah, EJ says hi as well,
Yeah,
and yeah. You've always got
I'm
the
sorry
streets
I missed
buzzing.
him. I'm sorry I missed him. Yeah, I'm sure he had some very strong opinions. I'm waiting until after this to play the show because I didn't want to mimic what he said. So after this, I'm going to play your show with EJ.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, talk soon. Peace, everyone.